Very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Y'all have a good night.
Thanks. This evening we have two presenters. And they both really know what they're doing. There's a lot of wisdom between the two of them, and we appreciate them both. I'm not sure what the right order, which one goes first. Brother Mike Stroud is going to talk to us about the best kind of seeds for growing in Round Valley. Okay? And what you can grow and what you can't, and what has worked the best. If you've ever been by his place in the summertime, you'll appreciate his wisdom and what he has done. And following his presentation, we're going to have Chuck Belshie. He's going to talk to us about composting and...
Compost tea.
What?
Compost tea.
Composting and compost tea.
It's
Okay.
kind of nasty to drink, so
It's nasty to drink. Don't drink it.
Must be healthy.
Plants love it. Humans don't.
Anna said she doesn't want to be a compost tea.
I thought you were going composter, composting.
Okay, we'll turn the time over to Mike.
All right, thanks. Start out, I've got a handout here for you. Let's hand this out. I've made a list of all the plants that I've grown in Round Valley. Everything on here will grow in Round Valley, so just hand those out. Take a look at them. Everything that's on here, you can come over and see at our house. The only thing I don't have on here is herbs. I've grown just about every kind of herb you can imagine, but I did not include herbs on here. So you want to just glance down that. This is what we have at our home, these things. These are the different fruits, grapes, berries, vegetables that we grow there. And these have all worked well in this climate at 7,000 feet. So the purpose of this handout is, this is 25 years of growing things in Round Valley. This is what works for us. I'm not saying we've grown everything that can grow here, but this does. We've done that. Any questions on anything you see there? I might mention that all of our fruit trees, all of our berry bushes, all of our grapevines, after having experimented around, I buy from Christopher's nursery over in Sholom. I've never lost a plant, a tree, a vine, or a berry bush from them. However, I have ordered through the mail various things, and I've had all kinds of problems with that. So I just say that I've never had a problem with anything I've planted from what Chris has over there at his store. And he was here last time, I think, speaking for you. You look down this, do you have any questions before we go into the PowerPoint presentation? Yes. I'm deaf, so you're going to have to speak up.
I live at 8,000 feet. Are these still appropriate?
The melons, I grow melons here.
Okay.
Cantaloupes and watermelons, but I've got them started right now in the greenhouse. So you have to start them early. They're not going to get the great big ones here. My watermelons will get about that big around, and we had luscious cantaloupe last year, so all depends on how early you can start. If you have a greenhouse, why not? Okay, and I don't think the extra 1,000 feet is going to make that much of a difference other than just in the growing season time that you've got. Okay?
Question, when do you put your melons in? When do you actually take the plant and put it in the ground outside?
I try to wait until all the Round Valley winds are past. So 1st of June.
1st of June.
Yeah, which means that if I started my watermelons in the greenhouse, it becomes a dang jungle between now and June. But that's kind of a trade-off. If I don't start them now, then by the time they come to fruition, I'm probably not going to have much fruit when it comes to melons. Everything else is different, but the melons I've got to start right now. So in the greenhouse, if you've got a great big greenhouse, that's great. Mine isn't. So around about the end of May, 1st of June, I'm going to have to take a machete to go through the door and get into that place. But it's kind of fun to see that happen. Margie?
There's also a difference between heirlooms and hybrids as far as growing season. You might want to address.
Almost all of these are heirloom heritage seeds. And I think you understand what that means is that we can take the seed from these and use them over and over and over. They're not genetically altered. The problem with that is my experience, Steve and some of the rest of you may have different, they germinate slower. takes longer for the heirloom seed to come up through the soil and peek its little head up than it does a hybrid seed. So you got to keep that in mind. And then the fruit is not as big and luscious and beautiful. We had a heck of a garden. Everything you're going to see on this presentation tonight is heirloom heritage seeds. But it's a little more difficult to do that. President?
Do you, just kind of quickly, are there any of these fruit trees that are more likely to bear fruit in this,
All of them will bear fruit.
I mean, regularly? I've got fruit trees, but they bear every 10 years.
One of the things that I bless all of my fruit trees.
Okay?
I bless them. I talk to God about them and I put blessings on them. And when I bless them, they produce.
Okay?
They're alive. They're God's creation. Their whole purpose is to bring forth fruit in the season thereof and fulfill the measure of their creation. So I bless them to that extent and ask God to intervene with the storms and the rude blasts. Okay?
There is one, can I make one comment? There is one fruit tree, I have one, actually have two of them now. Two fruit trees that bloom 1 week later than all the rest of my apple trees. It's a red Rome. It
Interesting.
consistently blooms 1 week later than all of my other fruit trees. And I've got a whole bunch of different flavors of apple trees there, but it is 1 week later. Red
Does that
Rome.
mean you get fruit more consistently?
I
Or
get
is-
fruit. Last year was the first year in the last 10 years that I didn't have at least some apples on that tree.
Okay.
Last
First
year
year.
was a freeze of biblical proportions.
It was the first year. Now, some, 2 or 3 of those years, I only had 10 or 20 apples on. But other years, I've had lots of fruit. I've had that tree loaded when there wasn't an apple on any of my other
Is
trees.
red Rome eating apple or is that a cooking apple?
I eat them. They're crisp. They're not a real sweet apple. They're a little bit tart, but they're really good to eat and they store well.
Okay.
Any other questions on this list? Those are good questions. Yes.
You don't have any tubers like potatoes, yams, or sweet potatoes. Is that something that just doesn't grow up
A
here?
little louder, please.
You don't have any potatoes on here.
Oh, I don't?
I didn't see.
How did that skip? I grow all kinds of potatoes here. Oh my gosh, I miss the potatoes. Yes, all kinds of potatoes. I planted gold Yukons today, Kennebecks, red Norlands are my 3 favorite potatoes I plant. Steve, what did you plant today?
Well, I planted
Yukon
the
Knolls?
the red potato, the Pontiac red.
Yeah.
But
Outside
he's
or
asking about sweet potatoes.
Oh, are you?
Also.
I've never grown sweet potatoes.
It's,
Have you?
no, never grown, and I don't know anybody that has around
Chuck
here.
grew
them last year.
Not
Yeah.
warm
Chuck's got
enough.
some from last year. You want to tell them how it worked? Did they work out okay?
Yeah, they did. This is the first time I've ever tried to grow them, and I grew them in my greenhouse,
That's
so
why.
that's cheating. But
It's too cold, I think,
very, very
time for
well.
those. They require a long growing season and a very warm climate.
That's kind of like the melons are along that same kind of a deal. It's tricky, but you can do them if you start them early and then just go from there. Anybody else? Any other questions? Hopefully that's helpful. That's a list. Okay, let's turn the lights down and have a little slide presentation. This is all taken from our place. And I'll chat with you a little bit about what you see here. We, 2 years ago, I started what I call the Back to Eden gardening system. And what that is just piling on humus and wood chips and everything, and instead of tilling the soil, you just pile it on. So you can see what I'm doing is I've hauled in some mulch, I've hauled in some different things. We bought all this mulch by the trailer load over in Taylor at a place called Perfect Circle. Is that what it is? Perfect Circle Soils?
Winter circle.
Winter Circle. And then this year we went down here to the Vernon Ranch, the Dobsons, and got a big load of steer manure. And all we do is just pile it. So if you have flat ground, we just pile it up to where you build up to where I got about 10 to 11 inches of soil above the ground. And this is what we're doing. Best garden I've had in 40 years I had last year doing this. It was just marvelous. The purpose of that, you can go on, I won't spend a lot of time, go on the internet and go to Back to Eden Gardening, and you'll find out what that's all about. There's a whole thing on there, and that's what we do after having tilled the soil for 40 years, you know, and working it that way. This is the way we go right now. Okay, next. I have a little greenhouse. We start our seedlings. I start the seedlings right at around about the end of March, 1st of April. Depends. Right now I don't start my squashes till later, but I started all my tomatoes. I started watermelons the other day. I'm going to put some cantaloupes in, get a good start on those so we can have a little bigger fruit. Steve?
Started meaning you just planted them,
Just
or they're
planted
already up?
Just seeds.
Just seeds.
This is all seeds. Everything you're going to see here is from seeds.
Yeah,
We start 'em all.
But they're all, your watermelon and your melon seeds are not up already. You just barely
I
planted the seeds.
just put them in the
Okay,
soil.
that's what I
They've been in there about 6 days, nothing's shown above the soil yet. I expect the next couple days we'll start to see some things.
Is that commercial?
There it is, greenhouse growth again, as we kind of go on. I keep everything in the greenhouse, and we plan on moving it, doing transplanting out around about the 1st of June. And I start hardening them out, move them out of the greenhouse during the day, and let them sit out during the day, and then put them in at night, and harden them out for about a week before I put them in the soil.
Is that a commercial potting soil that you use?
Yeah, I use that Miracle Grow soil. That's always been really good. I buy it by the bale, and then I have some composting during the year. But that's the soil I use. Okay, next. Okay, there you can see that was the beginning of last year's garden. We're starting to lay some things out. I have this little tool here for planting that's really neat. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but well, you can lay out a row. It has certain different little discs in it that fit certain kinds of seeds. I plant everything in my garden using that tool except for onion and carrot. And then we have a little tool that we can go along and lay them in the row that way. Today I put a bunch of onions in, just made a furrow with my hand, didn't have the tool yet. Margie's ordering it. I just go like this with my fingers down the row, cover them up. And then later on we'll thin them out. Everything starts out small. You can see in that picture over there, I use an impact sprinkler. I have it on a stand. Okay, I have that whole thing set up on an irrigation system, but I don't use it. So I found out that with this Back to Eden gardening, I don't have near the weeds I used to, and what weeds I do have, I can go and just grab them with 2 fingers and pull them out. You know this vine weed that we have here? Anybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
You ever tried to pull that out of regular soil?
Yeah.
Okay. I can take with this kind of gardening, compost gardening, Back to Eden, I can grab it with 2 fingers and pull it out, and it'll pull out a stringer that's a foot long. And so I just keep my whole garden very easily weeded with this kind of system. Also retains the moisture in the soil, so you don't have to water as often. So there's a lot of advantages, but that Back to Eden gardening will explain that. Raspberry bed, go ahead. Planting with the turkeys. I raise turkeys, and you can see these are my 2 partners here. I finally had to get rid of them because they would eat everything faster than I could plant it. And they were right here gobbling as I was going down the aisle. Okay. This bed right over here is one that I put in last year. It's in a corral where I've had horses for 25 years. And that corral was like concrete. You can still come and see it. Just as hard as cement. And all I did was I brought in a load, dumped the load there and piled it up about that high and started planting. Didn't do anything but planted them right in the compost on top of this hard pack. What happens is, Chuck's going to talk to you about composting tea. When it rains, the water goes down through that soil, hits the hard pack underneath it, and turns it into topsoil. If you were to take that back and peel back where the original soil was, you got it's a nice black topsoil where there used to be like hard as rock concrete. It's just amazing what happens there. Okay, making progress there. You can see that bed over there, just stacked up, just piled on. The only thing I did was place newspapers on the regular soil so that any weeds that were there will be restricted by the newspaper. So I put down newspaper about 3 layers thick, then just put this mulch on top of it, and about that much, and then just plant. This was another brand new right here. Here you can see the original driveway, just as hard as a rock. And all I did was pile this on, and that was their first year corn patch on that. I've heard people say, well, I can't plant a garden because my land is too rocky, there's too many. You don't have to worry about that. You can plant this and do this anywhere. I don't care what your soil is, because what you're doing is you're piling it on the existing soil. And you can plant anything you want. It's one of the advantages of Back to Eden Garden. You don't have to prep the soil in order to plant your garden. Carol?
You did this last year, so now this year, are you gonna put another layer before?
Well, I got
you do
enough
it?
on there. I put 2 years on. I've
Oh,
now
okay.
put 2 years of level, and I've got my beds up about that far. I wanted them deep enough to where I could have a carrot that would go down, okay, and
So
get right
perhaps,
down deep.
perhaps next year you'd have to do it again?
Maybe, but I'll
Okay.
see, but not
Okay.
not usually. We looked at it this year and we were pleased with it, so. There's our blackberries. Here's a raspberry patch. This is the raspberries and strawberries. Strawberries, raspberries. The biggest problem with there is keeping the birds out. And I'll tell you how we've done that and had some success. There's the garden coming up. You can see it growing. I have mammoth sunflowers along the north or the east edge of the garden. There you can see that impact sprinkler. See that? That's all I use.
Do you
And I
walk in the
just,
garden?
I do half the garden from there, and then I go around right on the other side and do the other half from there. Between those two sides, it covers the whole garden. That's all I do.
What kind of sprinkler is that? I know
Just
it's,
one of those,
what's the brand? I know what you're talking.
Rainbird,
Okay.
just a Rainbird, just a regular sprinkler.
Mike,
Any question? Yeah.
instead of newspapers, could you use that black soil that has all the little pinholes in it to keep the weeds out?
I suppose you could.
You've never.
Back to Eden Gardening, the people who have done this say just lay down some newspaper.
Okay.
That's what I did. Steve?
Yeah, if you put plastic down there, the plastic won't rot. See, the newspapers are gonna rot away eventually. They're there long enough to kill the weeds.
Okay.
But after that, they're just rot away and they're just part of the soil after a
Yeah.
while.
And they are.
Cardboard boxes.
And before 5 months is gone, that newspaper's all gone. It's just gone. It just becomes a part of the soil. Next. Okay, you can see some of the things that we've got going. We put this bed in here. This used to be a raspberry bed, but when I had somebody put sprinklers in there, they tromped it down, killed out all the raspberries. So we took that castle block and put it up that high, 2 levels high, filled it with that same mulch. All that's in there is that same mulch. Okay? And then I have rabbits and chickens and turkeys, and I would just take all the manure and just put it in there at the end of the year, or I keep it in a pile and let the hot stuff like the rabbit or the chicken manure sit for a year, and then I just mix it in there. Just take and shovel it on top. Don't even mix it in. Just throw it on the top. And when it waters in, we plant right there. So the idea with Back to Eden Gardening is you don't do all this tilling and mixing and this, that, and the other. You just stack it on each year and plant it. Any questions you see on any of these? This is our strawberries, and we put that little thing over there to keep the birds out. Grapes. I have some wonderful grapes. A lot of people have said, I've tried to plant grapes here, and I can't ever get any grapes to grow in Round Valley. And I've given you the type of grapes we use that work here. And every year we have, as you'll see at harvest time, we have a huge batch of grapes. Cherries, our cherries are Bing cherries. Across the fence, my neighbor has pie cherries. They bloom every year. It's like I don't know what it is, but he's always got pie cherries. The Bing cherries are a little more particular. We're going to have a heck of a crop this year, you guys. We're going to have a bumper crop like Round Valley hasn't seen ever before. That's a prophecy. That's Mike Stroud, 23 verse 6. Okay, next.
So plant.
Plant. Put it in. Some of our successes we're having with cabbage. When I was back in New Jersey, Mark and I lived back there for a year and a half. We watched them mulch their trees. And so all of this stuff that I've got in my garden, I've got it around all of my trees. It was like when we put that there, it was like that tree was a whole new tree, wasn't it, Marky? It just like greener and bigger and everything. Everywhere we put that mulch and planted in it, everything just went crazy. Just went crazy. Okay, next. Living food. There's some of the stuff that we grow. There's that corral I was telling you about. I mean, nothing grows in that but vineweed. But we put that on and had a great harvest out of that little garden last year. Grapes, cherry tomatoes. Next. These are our pole beans over here. They're on the far end of this. This is where we put our tomatoes this year. I've got a lot more tomatoes planted. I've got 9 different types of tomato plants, different breeds. They're all heirloom except 2, and the only hybrids I've got are Better Boys and Early Girls.
Will they cross-pollinate and then become?
I don't know.
Different?
I didn't have any problem with them.
Okay.
I have not had any mutant things at all with our heirloom stuff, so yeah, Carol.
Where do you get your heirloom seeds?
You can buy them, I got them online, you just go to Heirloom or Heritage, but they have a bunch of heirloom seeds down here for sale at True Value. I was looking them over today. In fact, most of their seeds at True Value are Heritage or heirloom seeds.
And are they by the pound? Are they by the pound?
No,
Well, they come in
Are they
envelopes.
packages?
I haven't found anybody anywhere here where you can buy in bulk and buy in any kind of by the pound type stuff. How do you like those melons? Aren't those great? Raspberries, next. Grape harvest. Turkey got bigger. Gosh, I'm telling you, I'd come and just work those onions over. Every time I picked that bird up, I could tell where it had the worst onion breath you ever seen in your life.
Did you have him for Thanksgiving?
Yes.
No, I gave him to Earl Crosby. Raspberries and Goliath sunflower. And we just had it.
What do you do with your sunflower seeds?
Dry them out after the head dries out and everything, the stalks dry, break the stalk off, put it in the greenhouse and let it dry in the greenhouse for about a month and a half. And then beat it loose and collect the seeds, blow the chaff off, just like they winnowing
I
in the old
roasted
days.
them
And
and
it-
ate them.
You roast them and eat them?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. There's our little watermelons. That's, it's about that big. They're really good. They don't get big, but they are a Round Valley watermelon, and that says something, right? Okay. Look at our onions.
Ooh,
Whoa.
That's onion that we just put, again, in that mulch. Just put it right on top. We mix the manure, or no, don't even mix the manure. I just throw the manure on the top. Okay? Blackberries. October pumpkins. Look at those strawberries. We had so much. We just bought a freeze dryer. And so one of these Harvest Right freeze dryers arriving tomorrow. So we're really excited because we're going to freeze dry everything. You've got one, don't you, Steve? And even after the frost, we still had, look at those great big tomatoes. Those are Margold and beefsteak tomatoes. And so, any questions on any of this? Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Is there anything in particular that you do to keep your raspberries healthy?
Yeah, it was interesting. We had the raspberries just growing in the regular soil. So I took a wheelbarrow of this compost stuff that we bought, these bark chips and whatever it is. I just shoved it into the raspberry, just threw it in there. Man, watered them in, and it seemed like within 24 hours you could see these things just go, They grew bigger, they shot up, the berries were bigger. Every place we just piled that stuff around, everything that grows. I've got it around my cottonwood trees, I've got it in my garden beds, everywhere where I want to grow something, I put this stuff, and it just,
And you get it over in Taylor?
Taylor, yeah.
You can get it in, Sholo has it too.
Steve?
I just went to Snowflake because that's where I lived and I knew the people and so I went. So, but they have.
Expensive?
We tried a couple of local places that they said, hey, you've got some stuff here, you can come and get it, it's free. And it was so infested with worms and grubs and critters, it just wasn't. So this I can't remember what they charge a yard, but it's reasonable, it's not that bad. One of those great big dump trailers, one of those, I think it was like $65, something like, for a great big dump
I
trailer.
think my pickup, I got a pickup load was $50.
Yeah. How much?
50.
$50, so that's about right. That's about right. Any questions?
Where did you get it?
Oh,
Steve?
the load. You go to Taylor.
During the winter, what do you do, how often do you water things like your berries, like your raspberries and your blackberries? This winter has been really dry.
This last year, I watered everything.
That's the first
Slow
time
dripped
ever.
around the trees once, and I took every tree and every berry bush and every grapevine. I gave them a great big drink around about the mid-January because it had been such a mild winter. Everything is so dry, and they're now coming out. So other than that, I didn't maintain them at all. Right now, I'm watering all my lawns, okay, getting them all ready to go, and they're greening up. So, but yeah, this was a pretty dry winter, pretty dry. Any other questions? Thank you. Hope
Just a
that helps.
comment.
Darrell?
You have a well, but if you were doing City of Eager Water, you'd go bankrupt.
Well, I would, and I do have a well, and I did do it by the city, and I drug a hose around that place and finally put in a sprinkler system and a well. So you're right. So that's an advantage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
One of the things that Mike didn't really talk about necessarily, but he knows it's happening. The reason that stuff just starts jumping up is because you're changing the pH of the soil. And it allows the plants to, it allows the plants to get the nutrients that they need. Otherwise, if you're in that alkaline soil, this is what we have here, no matter where you're at in Round Valley, it's alkaline. And you can see some places where the alkali is actually on top of the ground. And it's really bad down in St. John's. There's areas, I know they used to get mad at the Mormons. They used to blame them because they moved up on what they called the bench. And when they started irrigating there, supposedly that drew all the alkali down. And so if you get out kind of east or northeast of town, you can see a lot of alkali there. But I brought just a couple of things. This is a barrel. I'm going to talk about composting, and so you can see great artwork here, but I built this out of, basically it was like a pallet, and I put, so mine is about 4 foot by maybe 8 foot. And so what I do is I've got rabbits and cows, and so I gather all of that up, and I start. And I've got some big lawns, and so when I mow that, and so I usually lay manure down first in here, and you really don't have to compost rabbit manure. I can put that straight on the garden. But what I found is that it'll break those pellets up, and then they do better in the garden. And so I'll put a layer, and there's all kinds of ways of composting. All you got to do is get on YouTube, and you'll find out. And everybody's got the answer. And all I can tell you is what works for me. And so I might put like maybe 4 inches of manure in here, and then what I'll do is I'll put lawn clippings. I've put straw, old hay where the cows didn't get everything, and I rake that up and I'll put that down, and then some more manure and some more grass clippings, and I just get that stacked in there. And I don't do it, and it ends up being like this. It'll come out to the front. It'll be deeper in the back, and then I water that, and I water it about every 3 days. And I don't really turn mine that often. There's people that say turn it every 4 days. Some people tell you to turn it every day. Then there's some that say never turn it because that's the way God takes care of things in the forest. And it's kind of the same principle that Mike gardens by. But I turn mine about, maybe if I'm really on it, I might do it once a week. But usually every couple of weeks is when I turn it. And so I brought a little sample, if I can get to it back here, that phone. But this is cow manure, rabbit manure, chicken manure, and so you can see that that's what it's good soil. And then what I do is, if I had this to do over again, I would do inside my greenhouse, because I built grow boxes in my greenhouse. And so I would have filled those with something like this, and I would have been a whole lot better off. But I had some soil, and the soil wasn't real bad, but the last time, it was after I had this dang stroke, I had some people come and help me put stuff in, and I got a lot of bindweed. And so I've spent a lot of time digging that bindweed out, and for me, it's a real hassle. I thought, you know, I had it tough, but then I saw, you guys know K. Slade. I saw him sitting on a little chair, now he's over 90, and he had a shovel, and he's digging out his irrigation ditch. And I thought, man, there's a guy after my own heart. I mean, because for some of us, it's nice to even be here, and then you still get to garden, and I love to garden, and this year I decided to cut back. But this whole thing, you can use leaves, and leaves are really good, and Chip will tell you, his wife has him hauling leaves all year long, and he does all of that stuff. And you can break it up. You can put it through I used to have a little shredder that you put it through, and it makes it go faster. But for me, if I've got straw or whatever, I just put it in there, and it will break down eventually. And then I use my compost to plant, when I plant my plants into my greenhouse, then I put the compost right in there and I plant them inside the compost. And but eventually that'll all work in where I will improve the soil. And now one of the things I did do where I grow my potatoes in my greenhouse is that was filled with this kind of dirt. And so I can run my shovel, I can run it easy down 16 inches. And so my potatoes always do very, very well. And usually I plant them early enough so I dig those, and then I'll put a second crop in. I usually raise 2 crops of potatoes in a year. And that's because I put them in there actually I planted last year before right now, but that's what I do. I try to raise 2 crops.
Tell them how many pounds you got out of what
I've got a 8 by 16 thing, and the first time I grew the potatoes in there, I got 400 pounds of potatoes out of it. And so I had my kids in the valley, I supplied everybody with potatoes. But I think that one of the things is to be consistent with the watering and all of that. And so one of the things I do to get the most out of compost is I have this barrel, and this barrel was designed for something different, but it works really well. I've got that spout, and it sets up on a thing about that high off the ground, and I have a gunny sack and or a burlap bag, I guess. Maybe that'll make more sense to people. But I take that gunny sack, and then I take this compost and I put it in that gunny sack, and it usually ends up being about that big around, and I tie the top of the cord, and I run a 2x4 across here, and I fill this with water, and I wet that, and it just sits in there like a big tea bag, and so I end up with compost tea. And then when I want to use it, I can just open that spout there, fill this up, and I go in, and a lot of times if I'm watering or putting it on tomatoes, I don't like to get a lot on the leaves of the tomatoes because I tend to get fungus and stuff like that. And so I'll just open it up like it is there, and it comes out in a big stream, and I'll use it that way. Otherwise, if I'm doing some other things, other plants in there, then I put it down where it's a spray, and I can spray it onto there. And what I do is I cut it about half and half. That's all you need, and it really works good. Compost tea is amazing. And again, one of the big things here in this area is that even though you get good topsoil, it's still alkaline, and you need to, and that's what this humus, this stuff will do. It'll change the pH, and you can go get it tested. I guarantee you, just like Chris told us a month ago, you go anywhere you want to in this area, and you're going to find alkaline soil. And so when it's alkaline, it's hard for the plants to get all of the nutrients that are in the soil. But once you change that pH, then they can take up the nutrients, and that's why you see those things jumping out of the ground and making all of that. Yeah.
How often would you replace the bag with new?
Probably every month.
About once a month or so?
About once a month. And just take that, and then I'd dump that probably what was in the bag back into the mulch.
Uh-huh.
And One of the great things, I have rabbits, not only I like to eat them, but they are tremendous producers of fertilizer. And so, and it's a mild fertilizer that you can put, but again, I like to compost it because it just works better for me. I tried it on just my garden. I put it a lot on eggplant and my peppers and things, and it was okay, but I think it would have been better if it had been broken down. And so, but the compost, there's another thing you can do with this tea thing, like this. And in the compost, if you get chicken scraps and, just table scraps and all that, you can put those as one of the layers. And they do real well. You can put anything into this compost pit, and it'll break down. And that's one of the great things about it. I mean, that includes paper, all of that kind of stuff. What I was going to tell you, you can take green, and you could just put manure in here, and then take the weeds. Sometimes, the weeds, they do real well in our gardens. And so they're drawing the nutrients out of the garden, and they've got them in there, and you can release that into the tea. And one of the things you can do is just to chop those up and put them in here, and put maybe some cow manure in here, and maybe some chicken manure in here, and then take those things and put them in here, the greens, and just, you can stir that up and let it set for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then you can use that, and you're getting all the nutrients, and you're not having to take it. The other thing is alfalfa is really good about nitrogen. And so, there's all kinds of things. I mean, you could spend a year, I think, and never watch the same video about composting and compost tea on YouTube. And so, I just think it's a great way to use your compost, and it's going to really help anybody raising a garden here. One of the things I was going to mention, my favorite melon to grow here, I've never tried to grow it outside the greenhouse, but there's a melon called a banana melon, and it gets about that long and about that big around, and it's yellow. It looks like a banana on the outside, but that is the most delicious melon I've ever eaten in my entire life. And I raise the same melon that the cantaloupes, the Hales best. They grow very, very well here, and I usually grow that sugar baby watermelon. I've never had it fail, and and then I've got another one called Eden's Gem that I grow, and it's like a cantaloupe, but it's a green melon. It has green flesh, and it's really good, and it gets about that big around, that's all. They don't get real big, and I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't always get my melon started early enough, and that happened to me last year, and I had some Eden Gem and banana melons that I finally got some blossoms, but they never made it. The year before I had tremendous numbers of melons. That banana melon is a very, very heavy producer, and so maybe I'll share some seeds if anybody ever gets interested, and we can try those.
You said you do the compost tea with the weeds for 2 or 3 weeks before you use it. Is that about the same with all of it? Whatever you put in there, you leave it that long to seep?
Yeah, I would just leave it in here for 2 or 3 weeks, and 2 weeks usually is enough with this tea. It really works good. And I have this sitting out in the sun, and so in the summertime here, of course, it gets hot, and inside my greenhouse it's horrible, and so I usually have my fan running in the summertime at night, and so it's easy 120 degrees sometimes in there if I don't turn the fan on. And so I have to open up one big, and my greenhouse is 80 by 100. And so I could grow more food than I could grow food for 6 families in that greenhouse. And so it's, and not every little square inch is planted in there. But I've grown pumpkins. It's tough growing those kinds of things in the greenhouse because there's some pumpkins I've grown that have gone probably 30 feet down. And they just take over the universe, and so I try to grow those things outside. but the compost, it just works. When I was a kid growing up, my dad, he had a green thumb. And so we had, he would start trees from cuttings and all of that kind of stuff, and he would graft fruit trees, and he did all those things. But we had mulch around every single tree that we owned, and it just made things. And we did get irrigation, and we did that, and I never knew what a rototiller was, so I was an adult. I used to beg him to buy it. He'd just look at me and say, "Get the shovel and get to work." And me and my brothers were the rototillers, and that's what we did. Dug out all the roots and everything. Bermuda grass was the grass I hated down there. We didn't have
Johnson grass.
And Johnson grass, that was a tough one too, but this darn bindweed it's an amazing plant. It's too bad human beings aren't as tough as that bindweed is.
Does it have any medicinal quality?
I don't know.
It probably is. Someday they're gonna discover it was the cure for cancer.
Well, this mulching or composting is a very easy thing. It's just you have to water it, and you have to get out there and turn it once in a while. And if you're willing to do that, well then you can be very successful. And you can take the weeds from your garden and put those in there. I don't do that because I swear bindweed will survive anything. I think that'll be one of the things left over if we have a nuclear holocaust.
Roaches and
Bindweed will be the
bindweed.
first thing to come up. You have any questions or anything?
Just a comment on their rabbit fertilizer and stuff. In Guatemala, the Mayan Indians take their goats at night, they put them in a squeeze pen, and they drop, and then next day they move it on to the next one. That's the way they fertilize their fields. Just take their old goats and put them in a squeeze pen at night, and then
People
the
do
next
that with these chicken and rabbit tractors, they call them, and they move them about. But it seems like a long process. I don't know.
Do you ever compost animal products? Like
You know,
skins or bones or?
they say that kind of stuff you should. I mean, you can compost that, and you can compost meat that's they'll tell you not. But really, every one of these guys that I've been listening to here in the last 4 or 5 years, they all put any of those products. But if I have something like meat, though, then that's what my cats. I try to keep a few cats around my place because there's a lot of mice, and so they're not really pets, but it's easy to. So a lot of table scraps and things I feed to them, and so. But chickens are amazing, and I do like putting things into. And I'll take a load of cow manure, just put it in a wheelbarrow, and take it into my chickens and dump it in their run area, and it's amazing. They'll go through that, and they produce. And they'll break it down. You can take weeds. I take a lot of weeds out of my garden. Sometimes my old garden plants that I'm pulling out, I'll throw those in, and they'll get them all the way down to the stems and stuff. I used to have a real good what the heck would you call it? Anyway, it would break all these stems and small limbs and things down.
chipper.
Yeah, it was more of a chipper shredder, and there was a time I was coaching football in the valley, and my kids thought I was going to move down there, and they sold a lot of things that I had, and that was one of the things that got sold. And it was a $300, $400 machine I got for $50 at a yard sale, and I wasn't very happy with it, but it got done. But a chipper, if you're trying to do some things, is very valuable to have, and because eventually, it takes a while, but wood shavings and wood chips will break down. It just takes longer.
Sawdust.
Yeah, it's okay, but if I had sawdust, I would probably sprinkle it in among this, because it just, I don't know.
Too fine.
Well, and it just doesn't have any nutritional value to it right then.
That's the problem, there's no value in it.
Otherwise, I haven't found anything I've tried to grow here pretty much has grown. I haven't ever had any luck with blueberries. And I don't know what it is, but I don't think we can grow them here.
They require an incredibly acidic soil. And even if you have the perfect soil in a pot, most of the time, once you water it with water from here, you get the alkaline in there and they will die on you. I don't know anybody that's ever been successful more than one season with a blueberries, period.
Coffee
Just-
grounds, if you put coffee grounds around the blueberry plant so that when you're watering it, it gets more acidic. So the alkaline water becomes acidic going through the coffee grounds.
Well, even the blueberries, even in the east, they don't grow everywhere in the east because they're still not acidic enough
Yeah.
for those blueberry plants. And so that's a really tough
Yeah.
one.
When you had the person here last month from Christopher's,
Mhm.
I asked about the blueberries, and he said blueberries, there is no blueberry that will grow here.
I
Because
don't
I've
think
tried
you
them all.
carry them over there.
No.
No,
I don't
that's what
think
he,
you can
that's what
carry
he
them.
told me. No blueberries.
Right. Well, I think they're silly if you don't mulch or compost. You just, because there's so many things that you would otherwise be throwing into the trash. It's amazing what you can put into a compost pit. And then you're gonna get this kind of, and this is, I really didn't take care of it, but it did break, like I should have, but it did break all of the rabbit manure down to a consistency that I can use it now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.